So we talk a lot about electric vehicles on this channel, and I know a lot of the time we get caught up in this lingo and it can be kind of confusing to people who are just suddenly getting into the industry, and that's okay. I was confused at the beginning first, not that long ago, and the truth is you're never done learning. I'm still learning stuff, and some people have just taken more time to learn than others. So I'm hoping in this video to just try to explain battery packs in general, particularly for Tesla and a little bit around other brands, so that maybe as you're watching and consuming more electric vehicle content, you feel a bit more informed than before. So the good news is in 2025, the Tesla battery lineup is actually way more simple than it's ever been. Let's start out with the most popular Tesla models, because that's probably what you guys are in the market for / already own. And at least right now, the Tesla Model 3 and the Tesla Model Y, even though they may look a bit different from the outside and the inside now with some of the refreshes, their battery packs and powertrains are actually pretty darn similar. So both of these vehicles use what we call 2170 cells, and that refers to the dimensions of the cell. So 21 millimeters by 70 millimeters, and these are cylindrical cells, okay? So they look pretty similar to your typical AAA, AA batteries, and these are all stacked vertically in a big battery pack at the floor of the vehicle. And right now, at least, this may change over time. That's not the first time I've done one of these videos. All Tesla Model 3s and Ys in production in the United States are using 80 kilowatt hour battery packs. So it's just a bunch of these 2170 cells all lined up, and these are 400 volt battery pack architectures, and all of them, between the performance Model Y to the cheapest Model 3, are actually using the same size battery pack. So the only reason the long range Model 3 gets more range is because it's lighter weight, more aerodynamic, therefore more efficient. And that's something that might help you learn a lot about EVs in this journey, is that range comes a lot of the time just down to aerodynamics and energy efficiency, not necessarily just the size of the battery pack. So 80 kilowatt hours for all these battery packs, and most of them are made in Nevada. But of course, the up-and-coming new kid on the block, the Cybertruck, is using different batteries because Tesla realized that electric pickup trucks tend to be much bigger, and that means they consume more energy, they're heavier, and they move more air, so they're less efficient than a traditional sedan or crossover. So Tesla knew from the beginning that pickup trucks were going to require objectively bigger battery packs, so they wanted to find a way to drastically lower the cost of battery production, so they got into cell manufacturing themselves. So right now they do this mostly at Giga Texas, but also in Fremont at their Cato Road facility. But all Cybertrucks right now are using what's called the 4680 batteries. This means a little bit fatter and a little bit taller, 46 millimeters by 80 millimeters, and these are manufactured by Tesla in-house. There is some talks that other companies like Panasonic are also going to start making their own version of 4680s, but at least right now Tesla is trying to be as vertically integrated as possible so that they can drastically lower the cost of these 4680 batteries so that they can afford to price the Cybertruck much lower than other electric pickup trucks and still have decent sized battery packs on the inside. So right now, all Cybertrucks being made have around 120 kilowatt hours, but there is talk, at least, that there's going to be a single motor Cybertruck in the not too distant future that would be lower range, and we're talking like 100 kilowatt hours, maybe less, so that it could in return be lighter, more efficient, and of course lower price. But Tesla also, of course, is still selling, at least right now, the Model S and X, and these are using much older cells. They're actually even smaller than the 2170 cells, and these we call 1865, so 18 millimeters by 65 millimeters, and they're not as great if you're going for energy density, but they are good for performance, and the Model S and X vehicles are currently some of the most performance-based Teslas in production. And when you have more individual cells in the battery pack, they can all output simultaneously, which allows you to just dump a lot of power into the electric vehicle's motors all at once, which is good when you have tri-motor systems like you do on the Plaid Model S and X. So that's why, at least for now, it makes a lot of sense for Tesla to keep using these older designed 1865 cells. And the Model S and X, whether you get the long range or the Plaid, they still both have 100 kilowatt hour battery packs. So they're still not quite as lightweight or as efficient as the Model 3 and Y, but because the battery packs are in them, they still get pretty amazing range out of them. Now, if you're in the used market for Teslas, there are some different chemistries to be aware of. Like, for example, if you're like me and you have a standard range Model 3 that was made between 2021 all the way up until around 2024, those actually don't use cylindrical cells, okay? They use prismatic cells, which means they're just like rectangular blocks. They kind of look like books in a bookshelf. And those standard range Teslas use lithium iron phosphate chemistry, which means no nickel and no cobalt, which which are traditionally pretty expensive materials that go into those cylindrical cells that Tesla uses on all their vehicles today. And that lithium iron phosphate chemistry is less energy dense, so that means that it's not great if you're trying to make a lightweight vehicle, but it is good at being a very stable chemistry. So it's very difficult for it to ever catch fire or combust, and also it has a much higher cycle life. So traditionally with nickel-based cells, like all the ones I listed earlier, you're recommended to just charge them to 80% every day, because if you leave them at 100%, they will degrade a bit faster, and you should really only charge them to full right before you do a big road trip. It's okay, it won't hurt it, it won't kill it for you to charge it to full, but it's just recommended for most daily driving to not charge past 80 or 90%. Whereas with lithium iron phosphate, Tesla says because the cycle life is so good, you're actually fine charging it up to full as much as you want. In fact, because the iron-based battery pack is so stable, the voltage of the pack doesn't actually change as the battery percentage goes down, which is actually one of the ways they measure your battery state of charge. Like, is the battery at 80%? Is it at 10%? On those nickel-based batteries, that's how they check the state of charge a lot, is just through the voltage. But because on those iron-based batteries, the voltage is steady, no matter if it's at 100% or 5%, they actually encourage you to charge it to 100% at least once a week to ensure that the state of charge estimator is accurate. Now, Engineering Explained has done a deep dive on LFP batteries and has shown that for long-term storage, there can still be a bit more degradation when the battery is left at 100% for long periods of time. But the truth is the cycle life is still twice that of what those nickel-based battery packs are on most other Teslas, which is good if you're doing a standard range vehicle, because for those who don't know, a cycle is basically when you use 100% of the battery pack's energy. And it doesn't necessarily mean you went from 100 to empty. You may have just gone from 100 to 50 twice, or 100 to 80% 5 times. That still counts as one cycle. And if you clock up, say, 400,000 miles on a Tesla with a 400-mile range, that's 1,000 cycles on the battery pack, right? Well, if you go 400,000 miles on a Tesla with a 200-mile range, well, that's 2,000 cycles. And a lot of batteries are not known to last that many cycles over time, which is why when you're making a standard range vehicle, iron-based battery packs can be very beneficial because they're lower cost and they're more energy stable, and you can charge them to full, meaning that if you're in a more range-sensitive vehicle, you get to use more of that range frequently. So that's one of the things that attracted me to getting a standard range Tesla, was because I knew I didn't necessarily need to go extreme long distances all the time, but I was going to put some serious mileage on my car. So I wanted it to last a long, long time. So if you're in the used market looking at standard range Teslas, ask them if it's an LFP battery. And again, those were manufactured in 2021 up until 2024. And again, they won't be called long range. None of them have dual motors. So if it says it's a dual motor Model 3, then it doesn't have standard range. And there are LFP Model Ys out there, but they're not mostly in the US. Those are mostly available in Asia and other countries. But I know most of my viewers are in the US, so that's kind of what I'm orienting this towards. But Tesla's not the only company making lithium iron phosphate vehicles, by the way. If you're in the market for a Rivian, I'm very jealous because I can't afford one, but they're amazing vehicles. I think they're really, really cool. And their standard battery packs right now that are in production are actually lithium iron phosphate based. So that means the cycle life on them should be quite a bit better. We don't have like long-term testing on them yet because they only just started making them last year. But these are also prismatic battery packs, and I think in the future Tesla is likely going to bring them back to more vehicle models. They just aren't really manufacturing any right now. But also Ford has made a lot of lithium iron phosphate Mustang Mach-E's. In fact, they will actually clarify it on the Monroney sticker. So if you go to a dealer and look at the sticker on some Mach-E's, they will actually say LFP battery on them, and that's good for their long-term cycle as well. But again, typically they won't have as long of range as a nickel-based battery pack. The main reason Tesla stopped making batteries with lithium iron phosphate actually has to do with the federal EV tax credits, which there's a good chance that those may be going away because of the new administration. But because the federal tax credit was designed to incentivize domestic battery production, or batteries made in the United States, the lithium iron phosphate Teslas unfortunately didn't qualify. So that meant that all of those battery packs were being imported from China. So basically Tesla got a $7,500 point of sale tax credit anytime they used their battery packs made by Panasonic in Reno, Nevada, which is a pretty massive discount, of course, on the vehicle. And of course, Tesla even gets to collect credits just on battery battery pack production in the first place. They just made way more money by making long-range Teslas with nickel-based battery packs than they did with the iron-based battery packs, importing it from China. Even though the chemistry itself requires less expense, requires cheaper materials, it didn't matter because of artificial tax credit influence, which means I think there's a good chance that once the tax credits go away, Tesla will probably start introducing new models with LFP again, which is why I still want it to be on everybody's radar, despite the fact that in the US, no Teslas actually have LFP at the moment. In case you're curious, Tesla is also using 2170 cells in the Tesla semis, although they've said for volume production, they really want to switch it over to the 4680 batteries because they think long-term, the 4680 is actually going to be more energy dense than the 2170s. But at least right now, their main focus with those 4680s is cost and not energy density. And that's why the Tesla Semi, being such a payload dependent device, meaning that its weight is very sensitive because the heavier the semi truck, the less payload it's able to carry. They're using 2170 cells because at least on the market right now, those are readily available, they're still really affordable, and they're pretty energy dense. Probably sometime near the end of this year or definitely next year, Tesla will switch the semi line over to 4680s, which should be higher energy density and also lower cost, allowing them to ramp up production of the semi truck and deliver it at thousands of units per year. Right now, there's only a couple hundred on the road, but they are in their pilot production phase where they are building about 6 or 7 Tesla semis a month and delivering them to a few different companies with pre-orders. But those semi trucks have to move massive payloads and go pretty far. So that's why they're very battery dependent and they don't build them at the same scale as other Teslas. So I know I'm kind of just barely skimming the surface when it comes to electric vehicle batteries. There's also pouch cells out there which are not cylindrical, but other companies like Porsche have actually been able to achieve really impressive charging specs with pouch type batteries, but I don't think they scale up as easily as cylindrical cells. But that's my last point I'll leave you in Tailosive school today, is that the main thing to keep in mind with electric vehicles is that it's really all about the battery pack. Electric vehicle motors are pretty reliable now. They're very steady. They're rarely the part of the vehicle that goes wrong, but the battery pack is kind of the heart and the soul of the EV. It doesn't just dictate how fast it can go or how far it can go, but it also dictates how much energy it can take in. And if you've ever road tripped in an electric vehicle, you will quickly find out that it's not so much about how long does it take to charge from dead to full, because your EV is very rarely ever going to hit 0%, and there's not going to be a lot of situations where it makes sense to go up to 100%. You'll hear a lot of YouTubers and EV people start talking about the charging curve, and that's because battery packs accept a lot of energy when they're at low states of charge, but their charging speed drastically tapers off as they get to higher and higher states of charge. The best analogy I can think of to explain the charging curve on battery packs is that think of the battery when it's low, like at 5%, as an empty parking lot, and the electrons you're trying to move around in there are like cars going into a parking lot. There's lots of parking spaces when it's empty, right? So you can find a parking space at a mall when there's hardly anybody there. You've got lots of options, so you can park like that. But as it fills up, as you're charging up that battery pack, there's fewer and fewer parking spaces available. And that's when it takes longer to charge, and it takes longer for those cars to find a parking space because they have to keep looking for a spot. So because of that, it very rarely makes sense on a road trip, at least when you're fast charging your EV, to go all the way to 100%, because that last bit oftentimes will take an additional 10 to 15 minutes, even though going from 20% to 80% may only take you, 15 minutes. So waiting all that extra time when you could just unplug at 80 or 90% and drive for another 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours, time-wise, that makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot easier on the battery pack. So that's how most Teslas work. Again, there are some battery chemistries like the ones GM has discovered with their whole Lithium platform, or what Hyundai and Kia have figured out with their eGMP platform of vehicles like the Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6. Those can actually hold really high power deep into the battery pack. But of course, the whole charging characteristics of those vehicles is changing because they're all moving over to the Tesla connector, also known as NACS, because that is now a federal mandate. That has now become the standardized charge port for electric vehicles, and we're still in the process of switching all these EVs over. In 2025, there's going to be a lot of non-Teslas finally adopting this NACS port, and that's going to affect some of their charging characteristics. For most of them, it'll probably be a little bit bit worse in the short term, but as Tesla rolls out new and improved superchargers, which are more optimized for higher voltage vehicles like Hyundai and Kia EVs, they'll get better and better charging curves over time, and the charging situation is just going to get much, much easier. Right now, it's a bit of a mess with Electrify America being unreliable and all the CCS ports on vehicles, but rest assured, in the long term, it will get much simpler, much easier, and thankfully, more affordable. But are there other areas of EVs that you guys feel confused by that you wish someone would actually just sit down and explain to you more eloquently, or try to make things a bit more interesting? Feel free to highlight some things that you feel like aren't being talked about enough. In my opinion, there's no dumb questions, and you're free to ask anything you want down in the comments below. All right, so thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.